The early days of May 2025 witnessed a sudden and sharp military conflict. This confrontation erupted between the long-standing regional rivals, India and Pakistan. While the active fighting was brief, lasting only from May 7th to May 10th, its intensity was significant. The conflict involved serious military engagements across their shared and often turbulent borders. It culminated in a ceasefire, brokered with international assistance, which brought a temporary halt to the immediate hostilities. This short war served as a stark reminder of the volatile nature of relations in South Asia. It underscored how quickly simmering tensions could escalate into open military clashes, drawing global attention and considerable concern for wider regional stability. The events of these few days would be closely scrutinized for lessons learned by military planners and diplomats alike. The primary catalyst for this dangerous escalation was a devastating terrorist attack. This attack occurred on April 22, 2025 in the town of Pahalgam. Pahalgam is situated in the Indian-administered region of Jammu and Kashmir, a territory long contested by both nations. The bombing resulted in the tragic loss of 26 lives. Most of those killed were reported to be tourists visiting the scenic valley. This act of violence sent shockwaves across India and significantly heightened anxieties. The scale of the attack and its location, in a sensitive area, immediately pointed towards a potential flashpoint. The immediate aftermath was filled with grief, anger, and calls for accountability. India was swift and unequivocal in assigning blame for the Pahalgam atrocity. Officials in New Delhi publicly accused Pakistan-backed terrorist organizations of orchestrating the attack. The Indian government asserted that these groups continued to operate with support and sanctuary from within Pakistani territory. This accusation was, however, promptly and firmly denied by Pakistan. Pakistani officials rejected any involvement in the incident. They stated that India's claims were baseless and part of a familiar pattern of unsubstantiated allegations. This rapid exchange of accusations and denials created an environment thick with suspicion and animosity, pushing the two nuclear-armed neighbors closer to the brink of open conflict. The period following the Pahalgam attack, leading up to May 7th, was characterized by an increasingly charged atmosphere. Diplomatic exchanges grew more acrimonious. Both governments issued strong statements condemning the violence and warning of potential consequences. Public discourse in both India and Pakistan became more nationalistic and bellicose. There was widespread speculation in regional and international media about the nature and timing of India's likely response. Military forces on both sides of the line of control and the international border were reportedly placed on heightened alert. The weeks of waiting were fraught with tension as the region braced itself for an almost inevitable military confrontation, hoping it would remain limited. India's response came on May 7, 2025, under the code name Operation Sindoor. This operation represented a significant military retaliation for the Pahalgam attack. The Indian Air Force spearheaded the initial actions, with fighter jets conducting strikes deep inside Pakistani territory. The stated targets of these aerial bombardments were alleged terrorist infrastructure, training camps, and launch pads. India aimed to deliver a strong message of deterrence. It also sought to degrade the operational capabilities of militant groups it held responsible for acts of terror on its soil. This operation signaled a clear intent from India to undertake punitive actions beyond its borders, marking a serious escalation in the crisis. The Indian punitive strikes were not isolated to a single area. Reports from the Stimson Center indicated that Indian forces targeted as many as 9 distinct sites across Pakistan. Among the locations mentioned were Muridka, believed to be a headquarters for Lashkar-e-Taiba, and Bahawalpur, associated with Jaish-e-Mohammed. These strikes were described as precision attacks, intended to hit specific militant-related facilities while minimizing collateral damage, according to Indian statements. The scale of Operation Sindoor was considerable, suggesting a pre-planned and coordinated military effort. This demonstrated a willingness to risk escalation to a level not seen in some previous crises between the two nations. Pakistan's military establishment responded swiftly to the Indian incursions. The Pakistani armed forces initiated their own counter-operations, reportedly under names such as Marka-e-Haq and Operation Bunyanum Mahsuz. These included counter-air operations to challenge Indian aircraft. Pakistan also launched its own drone attacks and missile strikes against targets in India. This immediate and forceful response indicated Pakistan's resolve to counter Indian military actions. It also highlighted the dangerous dynamic of escalation, where each action by one side was met with a reaction from the other. The situation rapidly evolved into direct military engagements along multiple fronts. The 4 days from May 7th to May 10th were marked by intense and sustained fighting. Both India and Pakistan employed a range of military assets, including advanced fighter jets, various types of missiles, unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, and heavy artillery. There were reports of aerial dogfights and exchanges of fire across the line of control in Kashmir. Reuters reported that India suffered some air losses on the initial day of the conflict. However, Indian military sources, including General Anil Chauhan, later stated that a change in tactics allowed India to gain a decisive advantage as the conflict progressed. This tactical adjustment was deemed critical in shaping the subsequent engagements. The May 2025 conflict was notable for the first-time operational use of several advanced weapon systems by both sides. India, for instance, deployed its BrahMos supersonic cruise missiles against Pakistani targets. This marked the combat debut of the BrahMos in an India-Pakistan conflict. Additionally, India utilized its French-origin Scalp-EG cruise missiles. The employment of these sophisticated, precision-guided munitions allowed India to strike targets with greater accuracy and from standoff ranges. This showcased India's enhanced conventional strike capabilities. The use of such weaponry underscored the increasing technological sophistication of military confrontations in the region. Pakistan also introduced new missile systems into the conflict calculus. It was the first recorded instance of Pakistan using its Fatah-Y and Fatah-12 short-range ballistic missiles against Indian targets. These indigenously developed missile systems demonstrated Pakistan's own advancements in missile technology. Another significant first was the extensive use of weaponized drones by both India and Pakistan to inflict tangible damage on military assets and infrastructure. While drones had been used for surveillance in previous standoffs, this conflict saw them employed more aggressively in offensive roles. This signaled a new dimension of drone warfare in South Asian conflicts, reflecting global trends. As is common in such conflicts, claims and counterclaims regarding combat successes were numerous. Pakistan's military claimed to have shot down 6 Indian aircraft, specifically mentioning 3 Rafale fighter jets among the losses. Conversely, India asserted that its forces had downed several Pakistani jets. Indian officials also stated they had successfully struck at least 8 Pakistani air bases, including one located near the capital, Islamabad. It is important to note that both sides engaged in significant information warfare, with disinformation and propaganda efforts aiming to shape domestic and international perceptions. Independent verification of these battlefield claims remained challenging throughout the brief war. The intensity of the conflict and the risks of further escalation prompted urgent international diplomatic intervention. The United States played a particularly prominent role in crisis management efforts. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio were reported to be actively involved in communications with both New Delhi and Islamabad. Their diplomatic initiatives were instrumental in de-escalating the situation. These efforts culminated in a mutual agreement for a ceasefire which came into effect on May 10, 2025. Notably, during this period, China, a key ally of Pakistan, did not appear to undertake any unusual military activity or provide direct overt assistance to Pakistan, though Pakistan may have procured commercially available satellite imagery from various sources, including Chinese companies. The brief but fierce conflict resulted in casualties and material damage on both sides, though figures remained contested. The Stimson Center estimated that fewer than 200 people died in total during the 4 days of direct military engagement between May 7th and May 10th. However, separate reports indicated that ground fighting and shelling in Kashmir led to over 50 deaths in that region alone. Indian strikes were reported to have caused visible damage to infrastructure at Pakistani air bases. Pakistan, while officially denying the loss of any aircraft, did acknowledge what it termed minimal damage to some of its Air Force facilities. Conversely, Pakistani strikes appeared to have had a more limited visible impact on Indian military installations. A significant development in the immediate aftermath of the ceasefire was India's decision concerning the Indus Waters Treaty. On May 12, 2025, New Delhi announced that it was suspending its participation in the 65-year-old water sharing agreement. This treaty, brokered by the World Bank in 1960, governs the allocation of waters from the Indus River system between the two countries. India's stated condition for reinstating the treaty was for Pakistan to renounce all support for cross-border terrorism. Analysts also suggested that this move was driven by India's long-standing frustrations with the treaty's provisions, which some in India believe disproportionately favor Pakistan, and a desire to renegotiate its terms. Pakistan's reaction to India's suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty was one of strong condemnation. Pakistani officials vehemently denied any state involvement in the April 22nd Pahalgam attack. They characterized India's decision regarding the water treaty as an act of war and a violation of international commitments. This move by India has introduced profound uncertainty regarding the future of water sharing in the region. A permanent breakdown of the treaty could have severe consequences, particularly for Pakistan, which relies heavily on the Indus River system for its agriculture and water supply. The vague conditions set by India for reinstating the treaty further complicated the situation. The May 2025 conflict, despite its brevity, carries substantial implications for the future of India-Pakistan relations and regional security. It has likely established a new, more dangerous baseline for how future crises between the two nuclear-armed states might unfold. Military doctrines, defense acquisitions, and strategic planning on both sides will undoubtedly be influenced by the lessons drawn from these engagements. General Anil Chauhan of India emphasized that the Indian armed forces would remain on high alert and ready to respond to future provocations. The conflict also underscored the growing prominence of conventional military operations as a tool of statecraft, even under the nuclear shadow. Importantly, leaders from both nations, including General Chauhan and Pakistan's General Zahir Shamshad Mirza, confirmed that nuclear weapons were not considered during this crisis, offering a sliver of reassurance amidst ongoing tensions.